This is Two Blokes Talking Electric Cars with Trevor Long and Stephen Fennick. Thanks to NRMA Insurance and Uniden.
Welcome to Two Blokes Talking Electric Cars. Trevor Long, Stephen Fennick. You can find me at EFTM.com, find Stephen at techguide.com.au, and most importantly, you can contact us there as well. So if you're an EV owner, Stephen, we want to hear from you.
Absolutely right.
You can get in touch with us and we'll try and get you on the show and have a chat about it. This podcast is proudly brought to you by NRMA Insurance, helping over 3 million Australians protect the things they care about. And Uniden Smart Dash Cams, award-winning CanStar Blue in every category, these dash cams, and well worth the investment for your next car, electric or otherwise. Stephen, good to see you again, mate.
Great to see you too. Exciting show we've got today. We're talking about some awards given out for the Drive Car of the Year. We're going to be talking to Trent Nicolic about that. And you've been on a bit of a road trip too.
Yeah, I went on a road trip a couple of weekends ago, and I had one of those EV moments that EV lovers hate the fact that I talk about it because it's negative,
right.
But it's critical we talk about how bad it can be.
We speak the truth here.
Yeah.
So that's what the idea of this show is. We give you all aspects of this, and
Exactly.
we're also going to talk about some decisions made in the US of A that could really affect the EV market.
Big news, lots happening in the world of EVs, but we want to kick it off with the biggest news of the last week. So last week, Drive.com.au announced their Car of the Year awards. Now, there's a range of those awards. I think there's about 18 or something different awards in different categories, different prices. It's the way these awards work. But in what I was watching 9 News and they teased it, they teased the hell out of it. It's all night. And then in the 9 News segment, they gave me everything but the Car of the Year. Then I had to stay for Ali for a current affair. And then they gave me the Car of the Year. And I was cheering from the sidelines for a couple of vehicles there.
Yeah.
And so to unpack that from drive.com.au, managing editor Trent Nicolic joins us on the line. Trent, g'day, mate.
Good evening, Trevor. Good evening, Steve. How are you?
Going well, mate.
Very, very well. This is a big year for the Car of the Year awards for a couple of reasons. And it's not, we can't avoid the fact that we're seeing more and more electric cars, not just in the running for these kinds of awards, across many publications, to be clear, but at drive.com.au, there are a lot of electric cars just in that finalist category, wouldn't you say, Trent?
Oh, absolutely. And look, I think there's so much you mentioned to unpack. Even the fact that all three of us are talking means we're not sort of concerned about all treading on each other's toes because electric cars are now part of your realm as tech gurus, as much as they're part of my realm as a motoring journalist, and they're falling into categories everywhere. And the point that you made there, Trevor, that I think is absolutely relevant right now in 2024, is that if you're looking at, say, a Tesla Model 3, at what point do you stop judging it purely as an electric car and just say, is that the best sedan in its category, regardless of whether it's electric or not?
And for that reason, let's start at the very pinnacle of any award. And the car companies obviously look at this with great notice, and there's been press releases today that acknowledge the power of your awards, Trent. And, for Kia to come out and be strong in support and excited about the award that you've been able to give them is massive. So you've awarded the Kia EV9 Car of the Year. That's unbelievable, is it not? Because it's a fully electric car, it's a family car, and it's a Kia.
Yeah, there's so much there that I think is relevant to the Australian consumer right now in 2024. And I think there's different layers to it. Steve just mentioned then in your intro that you guys talk about the good and the bad with electric vehicles. You both test them probably as much as I do. You've had all of the good experiences. You've had all of the bad experiences. With all of that in mind, though, the sort of overarching concept of our overall Drive Car of the Year is that it needs to be the vehicle in that previous 12 months that's moved the game forward the most, not just in its own segment, but also for a broad cross-section of Australian buyers. And I think if you're looking at the Australian new car market and not getting the point that Australians love large SUVs, you're missing something.
Speaking of car buyers, Trent, I don't know whether you're aware of this, but Trevor's actually bought the EV9 before it was awarded Car of the Year. So what a genius he's turned out to be.
I've always thought he's very discerning in his decision-making, Steve. Funny you say that. I didn't actually know that he did, but see, this is the point, right? Trevor is absolutely not just the target market for that car, but one of the reasons that we think it's such an important vehicle, because Australians love large SUVs. They love them as family vehicles. Increasingly, as you guys would be well aware, they're looking at an electric vehicle and thinking, maybe do I buy one? Is now the time? And Kia has basically said, we've given you not just a large SUV, not just a very good large SUV or one with a 7-year warranty or one with the build quality you'd now expect of a Kia. It also happens to be electric.
Yeah. And here's the story, Trent, and I intentionally didn't tell you that because I wanted you not to come into this thinking that this was about spruiking the EV9. I'm just, mate, I was watching last night hoping, I was literally rooting for it. I'm like, come on, let's go.
Yeah.
But the story that I share now to anyone that asks, and this is a big purchase, to be clear, it's a massive investment for me. But, I've done it by going, well, the Kia Carnival is out of, its lease is up. It's time to get rid of it and get a new car. And I've been able to manage great value out of the Kia to the point where I can essentially do the EV9 by just putting a little bit extra down and getting the same payments. But here's the story, Trent. I said to my wife, we've got to get rid of the Carnival, so I guess we'll get another one. And she said, and her words were broadly this, shouldn't we get that environmental thing you had the other day? And I'd had the EV9 for 2 weeks, a couple of weeks earlier. And I said to her, are you talking about the big Kia? She said, yeah. So her mind is about doing the environmental thing, where Trent, with the greatest respect to greenies around the world, I couldn't care less. I'm there because I think the car drives unbelievably well, handles unbelievably well, yet has the space that I think is better than a Prado in any day of the week. Is that the kind of thing that come into the Car of the Year decision?
Oh, absolutely it does. Yeah, 100%. And the thing is that it's funny that you're transitioning out of a Kia Carnival into that, because we jokingly call the Kia Carnival at Drive the answer. You want a people mover, Kia Carnival. You want a family vehicle, Kia Carnival.
100%.
Road trip car, Kia Carnival, all that stuff, right? But you're absolutely right. The EV9 does everything so well in terms of interior refinement, integration of technology, smartphone connectivity, the fit and finish, the choice of materials, the way the cabin is laid out, the usefulness across all 3 rows, the fact that it still has plenty of room in it. And then there's the driving experience, all the things that we talk about, that we love about electric cars, the way that they drive, the response, how they feel when you're driving them. The EV9 delivers on all of those fronts.
I see, Trent, that other EVs figured in the awards too. I see the MG4 there, the Model 3. So this is a big statement, isn't it? Like, how much do you think this is going to move the needle for people who are maybe considering moving into an EV? How much is this going to affect their decision, you reckon?
I think there's 2 things that affect the decision, Steve. So first of all, that's spot on what you're saying. And this is the first year for us at Drive where we've absorbed the EVs into general segments in rather than just having them in their own. So that's a really good point, because, the EV9, as we've just said, is a fantastic large SUV, aside from the fact that it's a really good electric SUV. So I think the 2 things are that the way that electric vehicles are starting to become a much more viable option for more Aussie buyers. And then I think the second thing is what you guys touched on in your intro, which is just being honest about them and just saying, look, they're not going to work for everybody all the time. Like if you live in Sydney and you've got family in Dubbo and you drive out there once every 2 weeks, now's probably not the time to buy an electric vehicle. But if, like the overwhelming majority of us, you live in the city, and most people too, a lot of people you speak to still are 2-car families as well, then electric vehicles make a hell of a lot of sense to a hell of a lot of people if you can afford them.
And the MG4 then takes you to another whole part of that, which is the affordability factor. Now, to be able to get these vehicles at this price, and there's a credibility that comes when you put Drive Car of the Year next to a vehicle. And that's why, I assume brands love putting a banner up in the showrooms and things, because when you're buying a car, for a lot of people, they haven't bought a car for 5 years, 10 years. they're coming at this new. People like you have driven all these cars and made a decision that this is the one. That has huge validation for every individual car that you choose in these awards.
Mate, I think that's a really good point, and I think that's why it's so important that we put the level of effort and research and time and energy into the testing that leads up to the awards that we do, because I'm sitting in an MG4 right now while I'm speaking to you. Obviously, I've pulled over and I'm not driving while I'm doing it, but I'm sitting in an MG4 and just looking around me at the quality of the finish materials, the way it's put together, the way that it works when you connect your phone and using the technology. This is a vehicle that I would recommend. If an Aussie buyer said to me, I'm thinking of buying an MG4, what do you reckon? I would say it's absolutely worth you buying one, because they do everything that we would expect them to do, and they do it in a way that I think makes you feel good about your purchase. And I think it's worth remembering that most people listening to us now are going to hang on to their new car for 5 to 7 years. So you're absolutely right. You make a big investment, and you've got to hang on to it for a while.
I see Tesla is also figured in the awards with the new shape Model 3. They haven't lost any of their mojo, have they? They're still competing pretty solidly, even against the larger car manufacturers. Like we're seeing Mercedes and BMW coming into the market, but Tesla's still holding their own there, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely, Stephen. I think the really interesting thing about that too is every single head of every other car company that I've ever spoken to and asked about Tesla, the overwhelming response has been they deserve an enormous amount of credit for putting electric vehicles on the map, for taking electric vehicles to where they are. And the market and we as a manufacturing industry wouldn't be where we are now if it wasn't for what Tesla had done with electric vehicles. And in many ways, the way we see it when we're testing them, Tesla still sets standards in various different areas. For example, integration of owning the vehicle. The Tesla app is still probably the easiest one to manage your vehicle with. And I keep using it as you guys would. I mean, you guys dwarf my knowledge of the technology side of things, but you'd be looking at the app thinking, why isn't every manufacturer copying this? It's so easy. Tesla's supercharging network, the way that their charging network always seems to work everywhere that you go. And then, of course, the way that Teslas use the available power from the battery pack, they're so efficient.
The efficiency is a massive thing.
It's a huge thing. And I think to Stephen's point, he mentioned that the Model 3 has been updated. It's what, in the industry they tend to refer to as a minor facelift, but it's still right up at the top of its segment.
Totally,
and then just finally in that low end price sector again, it's wild to me to think that in 2024 you have 4 finalists: the Atto 3 from BYD, the Dolphin from BYD, the Aura, which is still not growing on me, to be honest, from GWM. But these
you need to squint a bit more when you look at it.
These are all electric cars under 50 grand. Some of them, nearer to 40. That people now have options for. But Trent, you and I have discussed this for many years, going back to Leaf launches. The parity, the gap between a petrol decision and an electric decision is still a stumbling block for a lot of people. I don't know how we overcome that though, Trent.
Well, I'll tell you 2 things there. So first of all, what's really quite interesting is I had a debate with someone the other day who was ranting on about things made in China and you wouldn't buy one and whatever, and then followed that up by saying we need more affordable electric vehicles. And I said, well, mate, I can tell you for sure and certain, if it wasn't for China, there would be no affordable electric vehicles on the market in Australia, because all those brands you mentioned, come from China. So I think the Chinese manufacturing sector.
Telling the Model 3
well, that's exactly right. Where do you think your Tesla comes from? That's right. So I think the Chinese manufacturing sector really needs a bit of a tick for that. But the other point you make, Trevor, that I think is a very legitimate one is we've been told for some time now that as demand increased, price would come down. Price has come down a little bit, but demand has increased quite significantly, and there are more electric vehicles available broadly around the world than there were back when you and I were testing a Leaf more than a decade ago. But I think that's a real issue. I think the fact that, if you're looking at something like an MG4 and saying, right, I can get into one for just over $40,000 on the road, it shouldn't cost 15 to 20 grand less to get in an equivalent petrol
That's
engine
right.
vehicle. It just shouldn't. And that, I think, as you guys would be well aware, if you're lucky enough to be able to afford an EV, great. But for a lot of other people, I think that disparity that you mentioned is going to be a stumbling block as we go forward.
Completely agree with that. Yeah,
Mate, I think it's great to see so many EVs in there. I'm stoked personally to see the EV9 at the top, but I'm also glad that
Trevor looked like a genius, mate.
but
I really didn't mean for that to happen.
Yeah, he's going to ring James Ward after this and go, listen, we made a massive mistake. But it's also great validation for those brands to feel like they're on the right track. But we have,
I think so.
We have to. Just personally, Stephen and I have to ask you a very important question about cars that didn't make the cut, and we need to know, like when you talk about finalists and cars, like is there a big gap between cars that didn't make the finalists? Like for example, the Mercedes-Benz EQE, or I don't know, the Cupra Born, the other cars that we own.
Look, I think so. A couple of things. You're only eligible for the overall award if you're new to the market for the last 12 months, which is why something like a Kia Carnival, which has won its segment for the last 50 years in a row, is not eligible for the overall award, right? So there's a lot of vehicles that have been on the market for more than that 12 months.
What you're saying is you don't like the Mercedes-Benz EQE or the Cupra Born. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. That's exactly what I'm saying. Okay. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
We appreciate your honesty there, Trent.
Mate, congratulations on the process. I'm sure it's an arduous process. People think that the job that you have is just joyous, to just drive a new car every day and all that. But we know how much work goes into it, and we're just mucking around with it. This is your day job where you're scrutinising these things to the nth degree, and among a team of you at drive.com.au coming up with a very rigorous set of processes to come up with an award winner. And I think it's validation of what you're doing, and it's a very well done process. So, mate, congratulations to you and the team, and mate, thank you for sharing the process and the outcomes with us here on the pod.
Mate, thank you very much for that. I appreciate the support, and thanks for having me on. A privilege to talk to you. Thank you.
Good on you, mate. I appreciate it, and we'll talk again soon. Good on you. Trent Nicolic from drive.com.au with their Car of the Year awards. And look, I honestly think, Stephen, that it's validation for these car brands when these people, like when we muck around, like I give awards, okay? And let's be clear, the Kia EV9 won the EFTM Best Car Award as well.
So you were ahead of the game as well.
That was before I'd even driven one. That was through ringing people, not Trent, but like Trent, and getting their advice on different things.
You had the vibe.
I knew that it stood out, and I think.
Well, I think it's sort of one of those vehicles that really is sort of it's a tent pole. Sort of you're thinking, right, this is a game changer in this category.
Yes,
it's big, it's electric, it's a Kia.
Yep,
boom.
But my point there is. The EFTM Awards, when you do it, it's just what we think of stuff. It's just it's my decision.
It's our opinion,
this is a team of people that labour over these things. So you've got to give respect when these kind of awards come out. So big news in electric cars last week with the drive.com.au awards, which we're sure you know about. But great to hear from Trent and talk about that stuff in greater detail. All right, Stephen. Now. I've had time to recover.
Are you okay now?
But last episode we were talking about the Ford Transit van that I was going to have for a week, and I was lucky.
Electric bus.
I was lucky that came at a time when I needed it, because I needed a big car to bring huge artworks from my mum's pub, which are now downstairs here at the studio. A bunch of boxes and things of mum's because she's moving. And I took the opportunity to go, I've got a big car. I don't need to jam them into the Kia Carnival, which, by the way, they wouldn't have fit into.
Right.
I got up to Walker and I said to Gary and Mum, I said, where are the things we're taking? And Gary goes, it won't fit. I went, mate, you wait till you see the thing that I've got.
Look at the beast I've just rocked up in,
But when I picked up the Ford e-Transit, so this is a transit van, fully electric, with a 68 kilowatt hour battery in it. I looked at the guy at the dealership, said, I think it's full, and it was. It had a full battery, broadly, like 98%, 99%. And it had a range of, 280, 290, I think, on the clock. So I thought, okay, so, not a 300 kilometre range. So this is low end in terms of electric vehicles today, because it's very hard to get an electric car today that doesn't have 400 kilometres range. Let alone 500.
Yeah, true.
But in the EV, like in the MG4s, there's low range models and then higher range models. So it does vary. And I think it's an important thing about the decision of which one you buy.
But just on that though, but the vehicle that you're driving is not typically driven out of the metro areas.
To
and
be
stuff
very
like that.
clear, and I've tried to be super clear about this, I accept that this is not a vehicle that you would normally take on a 1,000-kilometre round trip. But what it did was allow me to do a little bit more thought and purpose around planning an EV trip, because we've talked about how our cars will go 500 plus Ks. So to drive my mum's, which is 500 Ks away, you would normally get it there, or maybe one stop for a bit of extra juice. This car with 280 Ks range, that's in city driving. I knew for a fact that at highway driving, that's going to drop to I don't know how much. So that's the first unknown, is you don't know what your range potential is. Your range, the range of range.
Yep.
So I thought to myself, I need to charge definitely before 250 Ks, which is the first normal stop I would make.
Yep.
So I plan to stop around the Newcastle area at a charger I'd been to before. It's an EV Networks charger at an Ampol service station.
Yep.
Cool beans. It's 130 Ks.
Yep.
No brainer.
Boom.
I'll do that. Then another 130 Ks to Scone, and then I'll do another 130 Ks. Easy. This is my plan for the day.
Right.
I get to EV charger. The green light is on the charger.
In Newcastle.
In the Newcastle area. It's at, I don't remember. It's just
Near-
off the freeway.
near Newcastle. Yep.
Green light is on the charger. I pull in, big car. And my biggest fear was, how am I going to fit this thing in? Because I've been to that charger before and it's been full of cars and people waiting. And I thought, I hope there's no one waiting because I'm going to be taking up space.
right.
Anyway, empty. Beautiful. Pull in. And I open up the app, fault. There's a fault with the charger. I'm thinking, okay, can I reset it? Something happening
One
here?
charger, single charger.
So there's two, and they
Two.
were both reporting faults.
Oh.
Great. I am now in a mild panic.
Right.
And this is the moment where this is the problem with the EV space is what would any normal person would freak out at that point, going, the petrol station's closed and where's the next one?
Yeah.
Now, luckily, PlugShare, the app
So you
we've
said this
talked
was
about,
in an Ampol service station.
this was at an Ampol.
Yep.
And I opened up the PlugShare app, and there was another charger at the BP, which is only 15 to 11 Ks away.
Right.
So, beautiful. I opened up, before I even got in the car, I opened up the BP app, and I looked at the app, and I said, is it working? It said yes. I thought, I'm going to go there. I went there. I was able to charge. Happy days.
Right.
And then onward the trip went. But there's a couple of things about it. People in the EV space, when you show them this or you post about this, they're like, you should have checked. Okay. Do you check when you get in your car with petrol that the petrol stations are open? You shouldn't have to.
You assume that they're all working. Yeah.
This is the problem.
Yeah.
There's a guy who I've known for years. Matt Peterson is his name. He had I think you've met him too. He made apps called Quick Maths and all these great apps for kids back in the day. But he also started a Tesla hire car company. Oh. And so he's very engrossed in this space back in the day, and still is, I understand. He apparently was at a panel at that Everything Electric show, and he made the comment, and I give him credit for the comment because it's one I'm going to use going forward. Yep. Until we get to a point where you can get in your car without having to plan your trip A, B, C, D before you go, we're not there. Yeah. We're not ready.
Not close to it. Yeah, true. And again, we, as we said at the top of the show, good and bad. We're talking about this is maybe a negative aspect of having an EV. Yeah. No, you're right. Until there is that assurance that that the ability to charge is as ubiquitous as a petrol bowser, that it'll give people peace of mind. And we're not there yet, but you'd think, and you said this charger was in an Ampol service station, and that's the model that I'm seeing is that they're building where there's Bowsers, they're going to put some EV chargers.
And I don't mind that model.
And that makes that's totally, purely logical to do that.
Yes.
And I think if it goes down that path, the potential EV drivers thinking, okay, well, instead of going to the Bowser to get petrol, I'm going to go use the charger. Yeah. So they're going to go to the same place. There's as many of these petrol stations along the road. Yeah. So that, I think, is going to give people assurance as well where they're located, not like having to locate it in the middle of nowhere, not near the petrol station, not near the cafe, not near the restaurant. So that, I think, the petrol station, Ampols, the BPs, and those companies are thinking, well, this is the future.
That's
we have to do
why they
that.
are investing in this space, and they've got to plot it out. Like even the Ampol on the corner up here, before you turn in, has listed on most maps. It's going to be an EV charger. They just haven't started building it yet. Yeah. But here's then your other problem is, I reckon I put off 3 families from their EV ownership during this trip, because with this big van at 50 kilowatt chargers, so you can't do 120 or anything because they just weren't available. Yeah. I needed to wait an hour. I needed to charge for an hour to get from 20 to 80%.
So you occupied the space.
I was occupying the space.
And two other people.
Every time I got there, it was empty. But so in Scone, I pull up and I know the thing says I'm going to be there for an hour. And by the way, it failed. It got from 20 to 34% and the charger failed. And if I wasn't sitting in the car, I would have come back from an hour walk away going, I've got to start again. And in that time, another guy pulls up next to me and his family goes for a walk as if to get lunch. I thought to myself, mate, I cannot, I'm not being an narc here. I can't leave until I've got 180 k's range because at highway speeds, that's going to be 140, 150 maybe. Yeah. And I've got to go 130 k's. So I'm sorry, I cannot leave. I need to get to 80% and maybe a touch more. And so there's this pressure. Yeah. And it's a horrible, horrible pressure.
That's what's causes anxiety. That's the anxiety we're talking about. And that other family.
His wife is going to be thinking, how do we avoid this in the future?
He would. His wife said, "Why did you decide to buy an electric car?"
Yeah.
Yeah. He would have got some grief, and it's all your fault.
And pretty much, just finally on this, and Trent mentioned it very briefly while we were talking about the Tesla Model 3.
Yeah. But
I now 100% respect. I'm not a fan of the Tesla as a car. I'm just not. Yeah. But I now 100% respect the decision of people to buy a Tesla if they are travelers. Yeah. Because that anxiety does not exist. And here's how I know it. Firstly, I know there's a charger at Tamworth with 4 bays, and there's I can't think of another charging network that has 4 bays in more than one location in Australia. There's probably a couple, but broadly, Tesla doesn't muck around. They go 4, 6, 8, 12 bays, right?
That's Tesla's there.
And there's one at Newcastle, there's one at Tamworth. I was looking at the map. There's another one being built at Muswellbrook, which is also halfway.
Wow.
So they're building more.
And they're the ones who can be used by other vehicles.
Well,
not just
we
Teslas,
hope they'll be opened up.
The one at Tamworth can be used?
The one at Tamworth can be, so I use it regularly because it's super fast and I'm happy to pay the money.
Of course.
But honestly, that model that Elon Musk created, which is build it and they will come,
exactly.
Think about how big that charging network was.
I'll ask you this, right? Why
before they even sold cars?
Why haven't other manufacturers thought the same way? Why doesn't Mercedes-Benz or BMW?
Because it's not their core business and they're not thinking about it.
Because I know Tesla off the mark was just EVs, right?
It's a multi-billion-dollar idea.
Yeah.
The reason it's not happening is because it needs someone to invest for 10 to 20 years into the future. You're not going to get a return, and that's why these companies are struggling to maintain their charges. They're struggling to have that reliability because they're not investing in it. But Tesla chargers, rarely broken.
Absolutely, yeah. I drove a Tesla 5 years. Never, ever, when I needed to charge it, was there a problem with the charger. And I think, too, just talking about the development and the sort of looking forward, isn't this where governments should step in? I know the state government is trying to sort of
But all the
improve
government does is
infrastructure.
it's like in our other game, mobile networks. It's like the government goes, here's a bit of money, who wants to build a tower? No. Here's a bit of money, build a bloody network.
Build something here.
Yeah?
Build a massive solar array to get more power or something.
We need a company like a BP or an Ampol, but see, again, they've got they know they're not going to make money out of it for a long time. They've got shareholders. You need someone who's investing a couple of $1 billion in capital. Yeah. Elon Musk, if pushed, I think could make the value of Tesla back again if he just sold off the supercharger network.
Yeah, could. Hey, absolutely right.
I really believe that.
But he went in hard, though. That's the thing. That's him. He went big. Yeah. He went big early, knowing that if people see all these superchargers, people are more likely to buy a Tesla. And have a guess what, folks? That's what happened.
Love your views. Love your thoughts. We've got other owners lined up to talk to. So if you've got views on this, and it doesn't have to be you own one and you want to talk about the car. If you've got views on what we're talking about, let us know. We'd love to have you on.
We want to hear your experiences too. Like you may have had similar experiences to Trevor and myself. We want
to
hear all
about it. The bad
and
the ugly. Techguide.com.au, EFTM.com. Get in touch.
Now, there's been a bit of news out of the US, and you got to remember this is an election year too in the US. The Biden administration has apparently dropped the sort of lowered the rules, or dropped off the rules for the country's switch to EV. So they've really, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, their proposed rules to sort of the requirements for vehicle pollution are actually going to be, they're going to soften a little bit. So the what the takeout from this is the fact that this is really could potentially have an effect on the take up and the rollout of EVs.
So basically, they created yearly requirements through to 2030 that would aggressively cut emissions. Tailpipe emissions is how they describe them. And this is similar in a way to the new vehicle the policy in Australia, which says, car companies have got to have a certain amount of emissions or pay credits and things. And so basically, this is almost a backflip. It's not a complete backflip, but if you were ramping up in a graph to reduce emissions by a certain percentage by 2030, well, they're just it's gonna ease off.
They've backed off a little bit,
and that simply means there's going to be less investment because it's less required.
Yeah, and I think that the car companies are thinking, well, they're always thinking the bottom line, right? So if they're able to still sell, like when we see. If we see this ability for them to offer more in the market, more petrol vehicles, the pressure on the manufacturers to sort of go into EVs has sort of been reduced slightly. Like at the moment, I think 7% of the market in the US is EVs, which is solid. But if now that they've backed off these requirements, that could potentially plateau a little bit, and the manufacturers think, well, okay, we're still selling a ton of these big utilities and
it's
all
the
these
number
other
one selling
big,
car in America.
Then let's go harder. They're going to push more.
And
of those
we
into
were
the market.
told when Australia introduced this policy a couple of weeks ago that we were well behind the world. So this actually probably puts us ahead of the US now, and that will beg the question at future elections here.
Well,
do we need to be at that point?
I was going to ask you this though: if our man, not our man, but the man that they think could potentially become president again, Donald Trump, what is he? Is he a fuel guy or is he an EV guy?
I'm pretty sure he's an oil guy.
Right.
Yeah. So he's had those quotes where it doesn't suit the American lifestyle.
Right.
Same kind of thing that happened here in Australia with the Libs.
Yeah.
And I think he's big on the Auto Workers Union. So I think he would not give a rat's whether your car is petrol or electric. He just wants you driving an American-built car.
Yep.
So he would want whatever regulation and legislation drives people to buy American cars is what Donald Trump would want.
Well, Tesla's an American car. Tesla's American-built car.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So
and Elon and Donald are quite tight apparently.
Yeah.
So
well, who knows?
Maybe there's something in it.
If he gets elected president, anything's possible, I guess.
We'll have to just wait and see.
Yeah,
it'll be interesting.
Joe Biden, he's took a foot off the gas, kind of.
I see what you did there.
I
think he put the foot on the gas.
Well, yeah, I guess he has.
Took the foot off the charge and onto the gas.
Unplugged the charger, put the foot on the gas.
Interesting stuff. A change in policy just weeks after we had the opposite change of policy here in Australia.
America, whatever happens in America affects the rest of the world too.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think on that point, I think Europe has more influence over the global car market than America does.
Okay.
But it may not. Maybe that influence is not as obvious as I might think.
Maybe not.
We'll find out.
Maybe not.
Two Blokes Talking Electric Cars. All right, thank you to NRMA and Uniden, proudly presenting Two Blokes Talking Electric Cars. Thank you to Trent Nicolic for coming on and talking about the drive car of the year, the EV9. Let's go.
Trevor's a genius.
How good is
that car?
That's unbelievable. I'm going to get a drive car of the year sticker and put on the back of it.
I think there'll be one on the car anyway.
Probably will be.
Be across the windscreen, I reckon.
Yeah,
that's how big it'll be. Yeah.
I think we'll see ads. I think there'll be ads.
Oh, yeah.
We'll be back next week with another episode of Two Blokes Talking Electric Cars. Techguide.com.au for everything Stephen Fennick. EFGM.com for all my information. Get in touch with us. We love to hear from you on Two Blokes Talking Electric Cars. See you next week, Stephen.
See you, buddy.